This is Season 1, Episode 1. That's right, the first one of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. Our episode today is why we play RPGs and what value do they bring. Welcome to Mastering the RPG. Like I said, it's a tabletop RPG podcast. We're focusing on maximizing your game. Doesn't matter if you're a player, doesn't matter if you're a game master. Got advice, ideas, cool stuff found, and some strong opinions. But we hope you get something out of it. I'm Carl with my co-hosts Eric and James, and you'll find all our information at masteringtherepg.com. That's one word. Send us some email, send us some feedback at gamemaster@masteringtherepg.com. That's still one word. So what do you say? Let's get right into it. Hey guys, great to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. This is exciting. We've been talking about this for a long time. It's happening. We've actualized it. Our quest has been started, I guess, right? James, would you say it's been started?
Absolutely. Carl, the quest giver, has got a big yellow exclamation mark over his head. We're ready to go.
We're done with the ideation and we're in the execution. All right. So today, because it's the first one, I think it'd be great to, go around, introduce ourselves. Obviously, folks listening don't know us. So what are you working on? What are you doing? Maybe your history in gaming. So what do you say, James?
Sure. G'day, everyone. I'm James, DM James at rpgathome.com. I'm a professional dungeon master. I'm kind of the usual grey-haired, weird mustached kind of guy, but you can't see, but you can hear. I've been in role-playing games for decades now. I started when I was a little kid. I'm currently running about 10 games a fortnight at the moment, which is kind of very, very exciting. I started as a little kid and just totally passionate about a whole heap of different role-playing games, the whole point of gamification, the whole way that it brings people together. I play Dungeons & Dragons, I play Call of Cthulhu, I play a little bit of World of Darkness, all sorts of different fun things. In terms of current projects, very exciting time at the moment. I'm running a lot of after-school games for children, which is kind of really fun and really inspiring and a bit silly and I must admit sometimes a bit confronting because you're teaching the next generation of gamers, and so it's a very, very different world to when I first started. And yeah, having a lot of fun just teaching games, running games, playing games, involved in the whole industry of RPGs and having an absolute ball with it.
I'm not nearly that cool. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, me either. I'm not anywhere near that cool. What's up? My name is Eric. I would say I came to tabletop gaming later. As a kid, I did a lot of acting, musical theater. I did professional acting, voiceover work as a kid. So I was always doing improv a lot, but I never actually played tabletop games. But later in life, I was always into board games. I had Settlers of Catan when I was in high school. So I was a big board gamer, but came to tabletop games a little bit later and then just kind of fully dove in. I'd say I play a lot of D&D. I play a lot of Savage Worlds. I play a lot of Pathfinder. But I love trying smaller games like Apocalypse Engine games. Just a lot of random little one-shot type things. So I've done a lot of different games, done a couple different streams here and there. As far as current projects, we and Carl do a video form podcast for Savage Worlds. I also like designing stuff. I've actually a little bit of guest designing. I've tested for different things, but I want to get into that more fully. So I think there's a couple things on the fires. Is that the expression? A couple things roasting on the spits?
Irons in the fire.
Irons in the fire, yeah. But, a cook analogy is still pretty good. That's that. Carl, please take it.
Again, I'm Carl. And as Eric mentioned it, I kind of host the Tabletop Tango YouTube channel, which is focused on Savage Worlds. I started playing way back, Redbox, AD&D First Edition, when people didn't have skills and you had to describe how you were searching under the bed to find something because there were no passive checks back in those days. I really have done mostly game mastering in my life. I've done a ton of conventions. The one claim to fame I have is I probably did the most popular Dragonlance game at Gen Con. I had people lined up trying to play Kender, which I guess I should worry about people who want to play Kender, but it was a lot of fun. I read a lot of games. I really want to play more. I love the Alien RPG and things like that, but I don't get to play them. I mostly game master Savage Worlds because it's a great system, and obviously the more I know, the better Tabletop Tango will do. So that's kind of me. Like I said, I'm not nearly as cool as these folks doing actual plays and all that great stuff, but I try to hold my own. So that's me. So, hey, that's the cast and crew. You can see more of our bios and see pictures, all that good stuff at masteringtherpg.com, all one word. So we want to do a little bit of a format that includes different kind of short topics as well as a main topic. So today we're going to actually start right into things where we have kind of a side topics. And this is cool stuff we found. And James has got some really interesting thing that I literally had never heard of, to be honest with you, and I probably should have. But James, tell us about this this thing that you use all the time and really ups your game.
Yeah, right. This is kind of, it's not new news or a new product, but something when we talked about it, I can't run a game now without the thing. So we figured it'd be a great opportunity to talk about it. It's a wonderful addition to the way I run and game master all of my games now. And this is a great little subscription product service called Syrinscape. People who have been around for a while might have heard of this before. People that have particularly gone into the virtual dungeon mastering sphere would have known about this as well. But Syrinscape is a great little product, and we're gonna hold a bit of claim to fame here. It's a bit of an Australian-based product. It was developed here in Australia, so potentially that could be why I might have gotten onto it a little bit earlier than others. But Syrinscape I've been using for around 3 years now, and what it does, it sets you up with a whole suite of ambient sounds and soundtracks that are directly related to the most popular of the role-playing genres. And I got into it many years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I started lugging around a little Bluetooth speaker linked to my phone to conventions where I could just kind of play different scenes. And, if you walk into a tavern, here's the bard playing in the corner, here's some people arguing over the price of mead, that kind of thing. It gives you the background noise to any scene that you're doing. But as Syrinscape has evolved and as they've developed more and more partnerships with some of the more headline publishers, what I've found is they have developed an incredible suite of soundtracks that link directly to the most popular published modules. So I run a lot of the official published material for most of these large-scale games. So Call of Cthulhu, for example, has published soundscapes for every chapter of Masks of Nyarlathotep or The Two-Headed Serpent, which are really popular, really epic game scenes that span the world. And so if I'm preparing for a game, particularly a long game, it just makes it simple for me to go, oh, the guys are in Kenya this week, they're on the train scene, and I get the suite of soundtracks with a train leaving a station, a train chugging along the African Serengeti, being attacked by fire vampires on the way, screams and that kind of stuff. So straight out of the box, very, very, very handy. I find it's really good. In some ways, I look at it as the third actor in a scene that I'm preparing or a scene that I'm describing. There's my voice that happens because, of course, you're describing as a games master. There's the player's voice in that they'll respond to you. And the soundtrack just allows to fill in some of that gap. often when you're dungeon mastering, you're told to use all of your senses. You're told to use, what can characters see, what can they smell, what can they feel, what can they hear, and that element can be taken immediately away, so that people can share that volume. It's got some great features. I'm now currently using their online player, which I find really, really handy. So what the online player does, it's a web-based app. So at my end, I can press buttons to play different soundtracks. At the player's end, they have an online receiver. So it's an app that they can either put on their phone, or they can put on their PC or their app, or whatever they're using. It allows them to adjust their volume, and they connect to your game. And so that any sound that I play, you guys hear, and really quite easy to use, easy to kind of set up and link to each other's games, and really, really, really cool. It is a little pricey, I'm not going to lie. It's a subscription-based service, so it does cost $11 a month for the full-fledged I want everything. Or if you're just running, say, Dungeons and Dragons, you can get all the official content for $7, or Pathfinder $7, Cyberpunk $7, that kind of vibe. So, and you can leave afterwards, but still retain some of the sounds, which I think is really clever. You get kind of 10 basic soundtracks when you first kind of come in for free. But what I found is that any soundtrack that they release while you're a subscriber, you get to keep after you leave, which is kind of cool. So I've been around for 3 years, so I've got this huge library now of assets that you can that I can walk away with. So yes, there's a commitment, but I guess after a while, the commitment, I don't know if that makes it harder or easier to leave, but you can kind of leave and still have access to all the products that you've purchased, which is kind of nice.
So you get free music and sound effect packs when you're a subscriber. They release, but can you also buy separate packs?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. You can either be a subscriber, like I am, which is kind of, you get everything that comes out each month. Or if you choose to, you can just say, no, actually, I just want these. I just would like the sounds to Lost Mines of Phandelver, because that's what I'm running for my players. So I'll just buy that module soundtrack, and off we go. And in some ways, I mean, that's ideal. If you're running a module this year, just say you're running Rime of the Frost Maiden and you want every single sound for that module, it's there and ready to go. And it's so damn easy, because I've got to say, they set it up exactly, if you're using published modules, they set it up exactly like the book. So each scene is in the exact same order as the book might be.
Oh, make it really easy. Okay, cool.
Every combat has its own soundtrack exactly where it should be in the book. They have little one-shot buttons that you can press if you're a terrible voice actor and you just don't want to do the voices. The common responses from the NPCs, you can press a button and it will say it for you.
Oh my god!
Wow,
that's
crazy.
Extraordinary.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So really, really amazing. And so
and
you'll get all the NPCs with a yes, no, maybe kind of soundtrack going on. Which is really
and you
cool.
don't have to integrate this with your VTT, because there's a application and it kind of works on the side of the VTT, right? You don't have to do a bunch of installations or setup or anything like that, right?
That's correct. You can run it independently for your VTT, but in my case, I actually do integrate it with the VTT. So there is also the opportunity for Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, not Foundry VTT. I should clarify. Foundry VTT running their own embedded sound into their scenes. But for Roll20 and for Fantasy Grounds, you can actually do something called chat triggers, which means that when an action happens on the virtual tabletop, the sound effects for that action can actually play. And so if your wizard casts Fireball, and when they press that Fireball button, Syrinscape can trigger the Fireball one-shot sound, which is fun.
I've personally experienced that, and it is crazy. Like the depth, even weird ones like my character, we just making this joke about whenever Fey magic was on him, he might throw up when he was teleported. And so we actually made a throw up save basically skill. And I don't know, did you link it, or I don't know what happened, but somehow when I rolled that skill, we got the sound of somebody throwing up, and it was like insane at that level.
And that has some unintended consequences because it's based on the VTT. Whenever anything appears in the chat, the sound effect for whatever that appears in the chat will play. So in this instance, if you're rolling a vomit check, then you hear someone throwing up in the background. When I play with my kids for after school games, they've figured this out. So they'll type chicken, house, horse, elephant, just to get the soundtracks going as a cacophony, which is a bit fun. But so you can run it independently for your VTT, or you can turn it on and actually have the VTT do half the work for you, which I think's amazing. So I tend to not be able to use it without it now. I still run it in person with conventions, which is always funny because you've got a little Bluetooth speaker in this massive packed hall where no one can hear themselves. But yeah, really, really interesting.
All right, so just real quick, one more question: Are there generic packs too? Like, can you just buy generic fantasy, generic sci-fi? Do they have like post-apocalypse? Do they have modern? Like they have all different genres and.
They run sci-fi. They run what they call a board game ambiance, which is kind of more of a soundtrack feel. They run their high fantasy packs that are a mixture of the non-official content, doing all sorts of things. And the beauty of it is not only do they have their sound packs, and this will be my last kind of plug, I guess. You can delve even deeper in this. You can create your own soundtracks as much as you want to. So I've recently played around with Syrinscape and Eric for our one shot.
Yeah.
They've got a massive library of ambiances, music, one shot elements that you can put together into your own soundscape, and you can time it so that on a one button press you can have the dragon roar. 5 seconds later, the dragon fire. 15 seconds later, a building collapses. 30 seconds later, you hear screaming and running. That kind of stuff. So you can set up actual sound effects and soundtracks to your game, which is quite extraordinary. So yeah, look, it's a great product. I really love it. They're not paying us obviously to plug this one, but I honestly can't run. I find it really difficult now to run a game with silence. I find that it just helps me with my pacing and all those things. So check it out.
And
Sorry,
licensing for streaming and stuff, is that just when you get it, you have the license?
Yeah, they're really good. All they're after is acknowledgement. So if you're live streaming a game, everything has got royalty covered, and so all you have to do is just say audio brought to you by Syrinscape, and you're good to go. So really, really good, royalty free. You won't get demonetized on YouTube. Really handy little product.
Well, so I think that falls right into the cool stuff area. So everybody listening to this first episode, you can see the kinds of things we want to throw out there. But let's get into the main topic.
Mastering the RPG with Connor, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right. Hey, so we're going to talk about why we play tabletop games, the value they bring. And so let's just start off with kind of asking, why did you get into the hobby? What got you excited about, playing these games? James, how did you get there?
Back to me.
Yeah.
How did I get into the hobby? I've got a quite elderly gentleman now that I have to thank for this. He was a friend of the family. He was an 80s, I won't venture his name so I can say this, he was an 80s stoner science teacher who when I was a 9-year-old, we were having a party at his house and I was being a particularly precocious, annoying child, and he said, "Look, kid, leave us alone for a while. The parents are busy." I have no idea what they were busy doing, but he said, "Here, have this purple box and see if you can figure out this game because I can't understand what the hell this is about." And he dropped Dungeons and Dragons in my lap, one of the early box sets. I'd been really into The Hobbit for quite a long time. I'd seen Ralph Bashki's Lord of the Rings a couple of years earlier. I'm not that old. It was kind of in the mid-'80s that I saw all this stuff. And I, in the middle of a party with hundreds of other children running around and dogs and and there was a pool involved, and it was midsummer in Australia, I was like, nope, I'm sitting in a quiet room and I'm reading, and there's these dice that you use crayons to get the numbers, and
Oh yeah.
and I was done. It was all over Red Rover for me. I fell in love with all of it, characters, the rules, the setting. Absolutely all of it. I mean, I guess we were lucky a little bit in the 80s in Australia. Big, wide open spaces, lots of really natural areas. We've got national parks everywhere, and so the idea of exploring the wilderness and kind of having adventures in the wilds was really huge for us. So from then on, it was exactly like all those terrible tropes of D&D nerdism that you would hear from everyone in the 80s. I tried to get every one of my friends to play. I tried to get my parents to play. I tried to get my siblings to play. And eventually, as you go through primary school and high school and college, you find lifelong friends that roll d20s and slay goblins and just have a wonderful life. I remember my very first character was a wizard with 2 hit points that got hit by a rock, by a goblin in the first round of combat, and I died. And I loved every second of it. So, yeah.
Literally every second of it.
Yeah, that's right. All 14 seconds of it. And look, I would say I'm an old school gamer, but I kind of am not. Like, I started in that early time, but I've since abandoned systems and picked up new ones. I did my time pretending to be a vampire with World of Darkness in the 90s in university. I came back like most people did with 5th edition when I had children. I've dabbled with a lot of old systems, but I'm finding that the current iteration of role-playing games and the new generation of players have just been absolutely inspirational. It's such a different thing now than when I first started. So much more accepting and so more diverse, and just different voices and different feelings, and yeah, just loving it. Really, really loving it. So yeah, that's how I got into it, and I'm what am I now? I'm 37 years strong in role playing games, and I can't see me doing anything different really. I'll be doing this virtually on a porch at a nursing home when I'm 90.
So Eric, you said you came into it not the same as us. I'll say old timers.
Yeah, you can say that.
And I'll say that with a lot of love. What got you involved, and what drew you into this wonderful, wonderful hobby?
Yeah, it's funny because I kind of got myself into it when I actually got into it, and that's to James's point. Like, I always was adjacent. I grew up reading fantasy novels. I was a big acting, nerd, basically. I did a lot of acting, improv games, all that type of stuff, and played a lot of, computer role-playing games and online multiplayer. I was World of Warcraft when it first came out. So I was always kind of adjacent to it, but I never kind of went there. And when I just got to a point in my life, like I said, I was very much into board games. So again, like I was in, I would go to board game meetups and different things like that. But then just kind of deciding one day to I think it was Shadowrun, 3rd or 4th edition. I just bought the book and was like, yeah, I'll try to play a tabletop game and teach it to myself. And I almost my eyes bled, and I picked the worst one. And then this is when, honestly, when 5e, I had played a little bit before that. I played 3.5, like I said, I played online stuff and things like that. But then when 5th edition came out, I was like, oh, this is easy to get. This is totally easy to understand. And then just dragged myself to game stores and then used meetup.com and, found a game with another old timer who's just an old time GM in the city in San Francisco, who was running a game in person. So I started playing in person. I mean, obviously you guys did too, but I'm in this kind of more of the modern era. And then I just kind of snowballed from there. Just really, listening to things, hearing new, how there isn't just D&D. There isn't just these main ones. There's all these little ones that people are doing, and then playing with that, and then that kind of adjusted into online role playing, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, like I said, I pretty much got myself into it, and it was an outlet of, it's a social activity. It kind of triggers all my nerd stuff that I like, but it also triggers that part of my brain. I mean, to be truly creative like that, and to me, it's, improv. I probably is more accepted in the larger audience, but like I think improv and role playing games is cooler. I mean, it's just like it's just more interesting. I don't know. There's more at stake. I mean, you're dealing with so many more things than just improv. So yeah,
Okay.
for me that was kind of the
That's a cool how it all came together. Myself, it's one of my one of my burned in my brain kind of memories when I first started playing. One of my friends had the red box before we realized that 1 through 3rd levels not all that much, but he had the red box and we played once. We didn't know what we were doing, but I said, this is like the coolest thing ever. My grandmother did not have the money to buy me, so I drew on a big parchment paper a dungeon, just like this random dungeon, and then I put numbers in the thing, and then I cut a little hole in a sheet of paper and I slid it around and said, "Oh, I went in this room. What happened? Oh, I don't have the rule book. Okay, well maybe 1 in 6 chance the thing kills me, or so I had to invent my own game system just to do something. And then I found AD&D and Gary Gygax's tome of his tomes, and it was like, oh, this is just too much fun being able to pretend you're something else and working collaboratively with friends to solve a problem, as opposed to, obviously in the 80s video games, most of them were, head to head, very little co-op, and you're fighting each other, and it was like, oh, it was competition. Here it was something that was completely working together. So that just drew me in, and I think back then it was mostly fantasy. Now I don't do so much fantasy. I do mostly modern sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, which is kind of funny. I don't do a lot of fantasy, but that was all fantasy back then. So Eric got a little bit into it already, like why you enjoy them. I mentioned a little, enjoy the game. Anything else kind of that grabs you? Why do you enjoy them? I mean, I know why we got pulled in, but what are the elements that, and I'm sure the audience who's listening to this say, yeah, exactly. But what are the elements that pulled you, that makes you enjoy RPGs as a medium, as a hobby, yeah, Eric.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the main thing we could probably all agree on, I mean, it's fun, right? I mean, you do it because it's fun. If it wasn't
So
fun, we
much
wouldn't
fun.
be doing it. So, but it's pretty broad when you say that. I mean, it's kind of, it's so unique to me, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate this who are on the outside. I feel like it's so, it kind of combines so many different things, both sides of your brain, like that nothing else truly does. I mean, I've dabbled with, like I said, I've done a lot of acting. I've dabbled doing photography and cinematography in college. A lot of these creative things that do kind of, use a lot of different skills and things, but truly nothing is like tabletop gaming. I mean, they're all different, right? There's all different types of systems, but generally you have, like we've talked about, improv, this just total world building, story building, collaborative storytelling, all that stuff. Then you also have math and rules and systems, right? And mini systems, and then you have the interplay between. So it just, to me, it combines so many different things that, keeps my brain sharp. I mean, it's also very social. Like I've met people from all around the world, and which is kind of unique. Obviously, with the online being a big thing now, it's much easier. I mean, right? I met James. He's all the way in Australia. Yeah, I mean, it's helped me I do it for a lot of reasons. I think it helps me develop my organizational skills, which it certainly has. I mean, I struggle with ADHD. I have ADHD, so it's definitely helped me kind of, work that out. And when I need to do backstories and when I need to take notes, all that stuff. Also, for me personally, it's not something I always like to talk about, but I do have a disability. I get chronic migraines kind of in clusters, and this happened to me later in life. And so tabletop gaming has really kind of been there for me, that I can still have, these social gatherings. I can still be part of something, and be somewhat have a commitment there, and I can show up where a lot of other things I can't always show up because I have this kind of this sometimes I have this disabilitating condition. So it's kind of helped me keep sane, honestly, during these kind of hard times. And
Debatable.
we all have had these hard times.
Debatable.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have my own crazy. Yeah, I'm certainly crazy, but sane where I'm not just getting so sad and depressed. And the
Play
pandemic,
more Call
right?
of
We've all-
Cthulhu.
yeah. I'm there, man. I can understand existential dread pretty well. And the pandemic, I think, showed a lot of people, and I think a lot of people have come to gaming through the pandemic just because of that.
Yes.
Because it was something that
Absolutely.
we could, with the online gaming and all that technology that's there now, it's just makes it so easy, and people always want connection. And so, this is such a good way to connect. And I think we'll talk about this. Yeah, I'll save the rest for. So that's my personal stuff.
Giving a little taste or something else coming after this section.
I always jump
yeah.
there,
Okay.
yeah.
Woo, yeah.
How about you, Carl?
Well, for me, I'm a speculative fiction kind of person in the sense of that's what I think about. I mean, I literally will walk around and come up with a concept, and Eric loves the fact that I'm all about nanomachines and things. But I like there's a concept that people talk about, the digital dark age. And so I literally sat around thinking, well, what would happen if that actually occurred? And that digital dark age is when, all this technology we have and all this data we have stored in computers, if it all goes away, it's all gone. I mean, there's no papyrus stuck in a jar that we're going to find in 1,000 years because all this data is ephemeral. And I thought, well, what happens and what would, society looks like? And then I built a campaign around that because I could tell this story without actually having to write a book. And I can have players who help tell the story at the same time in a fashion where they drive things in the directions. And that's the whole thing about that idea is, I can explore something completely different because they drove me in a way of thinking that, I'm never going to write a book. But I try to think about that sort of thing. And so I think that collaborative storytelling, being able to write a story without having to write the story, just being able to start with an idea and build upon it slowly and see where it goes is just absolutely really cool. And then, of course, there's that visceral feeling of rolling a die and, looking to see if I'm going to get that 15, 14 I fail, 15 I succeed. Come on, what are you going to... There's just something about that, which I think is why the game is, gaming for adults is so popular because it gets beyond the, it's just purely imagination. There's actually a piece of it that's sort of grounded in mechanics and systems.
In consequence.
And consequences. Yeah, exactly.
Stakes, I think, right? It's one of the few things that we can really have stakes while not actually risking our lives.
Yeah. Or our children's welfare. That's right.
Yeah, our children's
Mama
welfare.
needs new shoes is not an actual thing in role-playing.
Decisions have consequences, but the consequences aren't nearly as bad as what they could be in real life, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So James, come on, what's got you going?
Very similar. A combination of both, I think. I'm a writer as well. I loved writing stories in my high school and primary school days, and so I find role playing games it flexes that muscle so much. But you get to do it multiple times a day if you want to. If you're silly enough like me that role plays about 5 hours a day, but you get to create these stories and this ephemera out of nothing. And they can be engaging and cinematic and epic and huge in scale. You can switch genres really easy. I'm a sucker for my Call of Cthulhu and my 1920s horror that I absolutely adore. And what's funny is I majored in script writing for television and radio when I was in college, and ironically, after my first kind of year of doing okay. The next year, I started to actually write scripts based on plots that I'd written for role-playing games. So I had a radio play set in Arkham, that was very Lovecraftian, and I had a television series based on vampires that was very much based on World of Darkness. Never went down the Dungeons and Dragons movie route, and neither should anyone, if I could just put that out there.
They're never any good. Never any good.
They're never any good. But what I found is my stories that I was creating with my friends for these RPGs were getting me distinctions at university, and it just goes to prove that this kind of flexible story writing, where there is an element of chaos inserted because of the dice rolling, because you're handing the story over to collaborative storytelling immediately. I've fallen in love with it ever since. The creative energy that you have of the daydreaming about what's going to happen this week in all your games, I think it's just great. It's just such a there's nothing like it. Maybe creating music, maybe thinking about passages and lyrics and things like that. But in terms of the immediacy, the creativity, and the inclusivity of doing it with other people, it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's bloody funny. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah,
I have not had a role-playing game ever, I don't think, where it's so much laughter, even the really serious ones.
Yeah.
There is a level of absurdity that happens when you bring people together that are having fun and you roll a dice with chaos to see what happens, that just comes up with absurd situations that you could never, if you were to write it, you would never write it. And that's what I love about it. It's really, really amazing.
And that's a good point to make. You can't write this stuff, right? It happens when you get 6 brains together doing crazy stuff. Magic happens. And so we have a writer, we have an actor, and then I'm just an engineer. So I'm not sure, engineer, musician. So I'm not sure how I work in this all. But okay, Eric, go ahead.
That was a really good point. I think this goes into our next kind of topic too. Is like James, like you were saying that you're a writer, and one of the things that it's beneficial for writers, I would think, is because it gets you out of your own head. And there's things that there's different point of views that you could maybe never kind of go to. You literally have somebody there, where you would write a character this way, they take the character in a totally different direction because they have a different perspective and point of view and background, just personally, right? So,
absolutely,
getting inspiration from that for whatever you do in your life, especially if you're a creative, I think that's huge. I think this is leading into our next topic, Carl. Right? So,
well, no, that's fine. It's fine. We're
and really collaborative. Just yesterday I had just a tiny little exchange with a player who hasn't been very experienced. He's in his mid-40s. We're just encouraging him out to role play, and instead of here's your character, here's some things, just posing a few questions about backstory, and suddenly really energetic and really creative responses coming back that I would never have written for this character ever in a million years. They're bringing an entirely different thing to it, which means the story changes dramatically. In this instance, his character witnessed a murder and was worried he was being framed of murdering his partner, and then so he's on the run. But then I said, well, is it the mob that you were once with? And he goes, no, I still want to be with the mob, but I'm on the run, so someone else. And so this just a very twisted and changed the backstory for me immediately. And the whole way we're writing this is different. Instead of being on the run from the mob, we are now still in the mob on the run, which is a very different game that I'd even thought of playing or writing. So, so good, so collaborative, so wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that does, like Eric says, rolls into, we've been very kind of, talking about our own experiences. But I think one of the big things with RPGs is what it does for people, right? And we were talking flexing our creative muscle, but and I think James, you work a lot with kids in gaming, and so let's talk a little bit about that. What does RPGs? What does it do for people, right? I mean, it's not just a game; it's more. I think for sure. So what do you guys think? I'll share a little interesting story myself. I wrote TSR in 1985 during the Satanic Panic, and I wrote them a letter and I said, could you please send me some material that would, I could tell mothers who are against gaming or whatever. And
God.
And they sent me a packet. They literally sent me photocopied articles. And I think the reason it's important in this regard is it was a stack. I mean, there's probably 20 articles in there, all talking about the benefits of the game. Even there was an article by Dr. Joyce Brothers, for those who remember back how big she was, talking about the benefits to people who are, not open. They're able to communicate better. So there was a lot of benefits, even back in 1980s, when people thought the game was evil, that folks had already saw the benefits. So what do you guys, kind of what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I mean, that's, I think, a lot more research. I mean, we don't have all the data here, so I'm kind of talking, things I've seen. I have some links to articles, but I think there's been a lot of kind of now research going into just even, first it was kind of board games, and now tabletop games especially. I mean, James, you'll have a lot of experience with children. But people with all sorts of, either conditions like mine or people like autism. I think there's been a lot of articles now talking about autism, or people who have other communication issues, learning, exploring. I've seen a lot of things with, people who are exploring their identity, especially younger people. It's can be a very safe place to do that, because you're taking on these other roles, and you can, really live out a character that you can't do anywhere else, right? You can't do this anywhere else, that you can really, truly live out how somebody else is, right? You take on different character, and they can be, besides just being a fantasy creature, just any sex, any gender, all of that type of thing. So I think it's so unique in that really anybody can benefit from kind of exploring a different character and what that means, and kind of being in that safe space.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
you're gaming with. I don't know if I call it friends, but you're gaming with people who have a similar thought process. And so it is a safe place. You can be somebody you're not. You can be goofy, like mentioned, and like no judgments, right? I mean, we're all pretending to be something else. So no judgments. I think that, and even in conventions, I do a lot of convention work and play games. These people don't even know each other, but they're all coming in with the same mindset, and we're all doing the same thing. And I have yet in all the games I've run ever have somebody come away, feeling like somebody came down on them or things just weren't right. Usually it's a very positive experience, but obviously there's always that opportunity, and that's where we have things like safety protocols, that kind of stuff. But generally that's never happened. I mean, it's just people recognize that it's our tribe, so. Yeah,
I mean, there certainly is, it's people, right? So there certainly are bad apples. There's certainly kind of toxic games or toxic GMs or toxic players. I mean, that there's certainly something that exists, right? Because people are people. But I think generally, gamers are going to be more open and more inclusive and all that stuff. And I think a lot of times, now people, especially that there's a lot of younger people coming into the hobby, especially the last couple of years, oh my God, that you have those things like, here are the guidelines, we're not doing this, you have to be okay with these type of things, pronoun, like people are very upfront with, these are what people feel comfortable with. I want you to be open with me about what you're comfortable with. And we're just seeing that a lot more and more, which is
that's why we talk about,
it's good, right?
We talk about lines and veils now, we talk about X cards, we talk about things that maybe we didn't talk about in way back when, in the early days. But I think that goes back to the game tries to be inclusive, much more so than, obviously it used to be nerds in the basement, much more inclusive, and people are coming up with tools and ways of making that more systematic. So people can talk about, here's my lines, we're not going to cross them, here's my veils, here's where I want us to fade to black. It's building on that momentum, I think.
Yeah, and it's creating the structures for shared experience as well. In the past, Dungeons and Dragons might have been, I've talked D&D specifically, but it was almost like a ranked system. What level are you? There's a kind of, I'm more experienced than you as a player because my character is X level, and that's the commonality of language. The latest generation, where the commonality of language is very, very different. It's about characterization, and it's about consent, and it's about joint storytelling. And so I find that the transition is very, very different. But the game is evolving different systems to deal with each other socially, which I think is really important and really, really amazing. One thing I've noticed very much since the pandemic is a massive shift in terms of people getting involved in role-playing games. And I know that there was a huge surge just prior. We all know about the rise of 5th edition, but one of the real benefits I've seen since the pandemic hit is the urge to reconnect, and the urge to connect in a social aspect that isn't just about kind of these lame Zoom catch up, let's drink margaritas together on a Zoom call, or let's do a quiz. This is a concerted effort to connect, and with a goal in mind, and it's more of a distraction, but it's better than just online gaming.
But you are allowed to have a margarita while you're gaming.
Yeah, that's true.
That's still allowed. You can do that.
And one of the things that I've noticed a lot in the last couple of years is about people reconnecting with old friends as well. These might be people that you haven't connected with in quite a while, and they're using gaming as a way to reconnect. Which I think is really, really lovely. I'm kind of in the very lucky position to be doing this kind of as a career, and so I get to see groups of friends that might not have seen each other or hung out together for years, or groups of friends that have been separated by distance and then were separated by lockdown, that now use role-playing games, particularly online role-playing games, for their kind of weekly or fortnightly catch-up, where they might have once gone down to the local bar, or they might have once met up at the local football game. Now they're doing it over a margarita or a whiskey, playing Dungeons and Dragons on a weeknight. It's been quite extraordinary. I mean, the benefits of role-playing games and the benefits of games are pretty well, kind of, it's a big scholarly subject.
Yeah.
I know in Australia we've got some really great people working in the space. There's a wonderful company called the Emblem Studios that are looking at role-playing games for corporate sector. And some of the larger corporate players in Australia are now taking it on as a way to add elements to leadership and team building. But even more than that, more about problem solving and how to look at issues outside the box and from different perspectives, because this idea of an empathetic experience where you're literally walking in someone else's shoes and being able to kind of see things from different perspectives is a really, really important thing. It's really, really, really amazing.
And I've heard a lot of people in Hollywood, like you were talking about being a writer. I mean, I have a very short list here, but there's certainly a lot of, you'll hear randomly about this actor or this writer or this director who will credit like playing D&D for kind of setting them on this path and, exposing them to these things. So, I think just if you are, even if, I imagine anybody who's listening to this plays tabletop games, but if you aren't, I don't know how much more we have to convince you, but, any type of creative really can benefit. And I think the one thing I would say to tabletop gamers, like if you only play one type of game, I still think it is like if you only play a D&D, I really think it's worth it to go kind of check out some of the other, systems, do a one shot and some of the more narrative systems. And because, while they all have similarities, they are somewhat defined by their mechanics, and there's things that you do that challenge you in different ways that one system allows that then there's just another system might not allow. Like the first time that I played Monster Hearts, which is a Apocalypse Engine game, which is kind of like a high school, college, teen angsty, supernatural romance. It's LGBTQ kind of focused, not like it's you have to be that type of character, but it's the writer, it's open and explores that. And to me, it was very, that is so just narrative, and there's not really much dice rolling. And the main kind of currency in the game is your social connections with other players that you can take advantage of. And so it kind of pushed me in ways that I never really experienced playing D&D. So I definitely think, the benefits of playing games like we talked about is, pretty apparent at this point, but I think it's still worth exploring other systems and you'll get more out of it, I think, too. So that's just a little tidbit I'm throwing in.
And maybe someday we can brainstorm about how we can get people who are just only D&D players to try other systems. That's a hard nut. That's a hard nut to crack, I think. So
yeah, it is.
It's I resisted it for a long time going back to Dungeons and Dragons, but I've got to say, for kids particularly, I mean, for me, the kids when I had children and wanted to pass on this hobby, D&D was the accessible one. I mean, I'm not going to rip their faces off with eldritch horrors with Call of Cthulhu and some of the darker themes for the Mork Borgs or the World of Darkness stuff is a bit more hard. But I did want to touch on a little bit about young people and how they're embracing D&D and the differences that I've observed, I guess, and particularly in role-playing games. And it is a different world out there for old guys like me, I guess, from the experiences of when we were playing. There is still that desire of kids that really want to get an understanding of the rules and how it all works. But the elements of characterization and the elements of motivation and empathy and story are so much richer and so incredible, and particularly over the last few years where a lot of kids were in lockdown, a lot of kids were unable to interact with their peers, unable to kind of catch up and meet up with other children. Being able to make friendships and to engage with other children in a social sense has been really quite incredible. I get so much feedback from parents saying, because of D&D, because of role-playing games, these kids have been able to maintain social skills that probably would have dwindled on the vine a little bit. Lots of kids that were really isolated and really doing it tough and were able to engage, talk, laugh, have fun for a few hours a week playing role-playing games. And while all the kids were online and they're all playing Fortnite and they're all doing, all the other, what do they call it, Minecraft and these kinds of stuff, it was the RPGs that kind of kept them sane. So it's the mental health resilience of this stuff over the last few years really, really important too. I don't think we can underestimate it.
Now I know you might not have the biggest view into it, but you have some. But like, nerd culture obviously has been embraced generally, but there's still, being a nerd or a dork or whatever can still be a little stigmatized. What have you seen with the kids now? Like, they're just come from all backgrounds, and not necessarily just the nerds, or is like D&D the only thing they're into, or like is there that same stigma now in like elementary school and high school, that kind of thing, or is it?
I can only speak to Australia, but I'm not finding that at all. I'm finding that kids are coming from every background. And these are younger kids that couldn't have gotten into it from Stranger Things or Critical Role, all those things, right?
Oh.
So this is not a generation. This is kids are joining my game a bit younger than that, and so they're coming to it from movies. They're coming to it from anime. They're coming to it from their parents, because their parents are saying, "Oh, I used to play that as a kid. You should give it a go." So it's that next generation, that second generation of players that are coming through. And it's not at all, so diverse. I have more girls that play the boys, which is a mind blown for me as an old guy that hid from girls in the lunchroom and played D&D. More girls than boys. The diversity is extraordinary. And as these kids are getting older and they're exploring their characters, the pronouns, the identification, the non-gendering of their characters is also really, really extraordinary. These guys they're telling stories of their own generation, and it's very different to ours. And it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. It's inclusive and funny and nuanced and with an emotional complexity that I don't think I didn't have when I was 13, at all. It was like I hit the goblin and steal his money. That was it. There was no kind of other level of complexity.
Kill things and steal their stuff.
The future's really amazing. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, that's That's fantastic. I don't have that opportunity. I know my kids growing up very much, dad was the geek gamer guy. And so they just picked it up from that. It's nice to see that as a cultural phenomenon. It's just another pastime, right? It's just another interesting pastime that's got some huge benefits that we think and gives you, let's just start. But it's not a thing nerds do. It's just a pastime. It's things you do if you think it's fun, right? So that's pretty cool. So does anybody have any, kind of final thoughts? What would you like people to take away from this first episode?
Play more games. No. Just, look,
brilliant.
We're waxing lyrical here, but and I guess in future episodes we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we come to it, how we might improve our games, so a bit more of the mechanical things. In some ways, this is a bit of an introduction to our ethos and how we're thinking about things anyway. But in my mind, it's about playing more, enjoying it more, and then being okay playing it. It's kind of one of those things that this should not be a guilty pleasure anymore. It might have been for some of us when we were growing up. Sorry, I'm having a reflux moment, but it might have been for.
I thought you were just getting choked up. I thought you were just getting choked up.
It's very emotional. Yeah, it's
let it out.
At my age, it's hard to tell the difference. It's about the love of what we do in a lot of ways, and I think all three of us are really passionate about it. I can't wait to kind of talk a bit more in the future about what makes it all tick.
I think that's a great way to put an exclamation point period on a discussion. We will talk so much more about upping your game. That's the whole point, is to make it better. So, hey, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you got something out of it. Keep watching. Tabletop Tango is a YouTube channel. I gotta get used to this. Keep listening, and remember to drop by masteringtherepg.com, all one word, to learn about the other projects we're working on. Contact us, send us some notes, that sort of thing.
And we want questions too, right, Carl? We want to hear questions about the game. We want to resolve things. If you have any questions about, or sorry, I might be cutting ahead here, but judgments that you want, we want to hear input about everything.
Yeah. And where would they send that input, Eric? Where might that be?
It's masteringtherepg.com. The Game Master at
and you can email it gamemaster at masteringtherepg.com. Game Master is one word. Mastering the RPG is one word.
It's all one word.
It's all one word. So, hey, thanks, everybody. We're early, so I'm not going to ask you to give us a good review yet. Give us 5 stars when you listen to the second episode and you love it, because then it's not just one, it's a trend. And so hopefully you tune in next time. We'll see you then, and just wishing you a great games and that the dice always roll your way.